Today, the more the world changes, the more Malcolm X stays the same.
When we think of who we can be and what we need to be in this moment to liberate ourselves, we can look to Malcolm X.
We talked to author Ibram X. Kendi about what Malcolm's legacy means now in a moment of backlash, book bans, and political reckoning. I'm Natasha Del Toro, and this is The Take.
I don't think I agree already. I mean, first of all, the more the world changes, the more Malcolm X stays the same. I don't see that as being the case, in the sense that the more the world's antagonisms remain the same, the more they change Malcolm X to suit and to impose an acceptance of the consistency of those hostilities and antagonisms of the exploitation and the oppression. So Malcolm is changed, and I think that's part of the problem.
Thank you for joining us. So you have a new book called Malcolm Lives, the official biography of Malcolm X for young readers. And I'm curious, I think we should start off this conversation by saying, who was Malcolm X to you?
So to me, Malcolm X was one of the most inspirational and fearless revolutionaries, African-American revolutionaries and orators, of the 20th century. Someone who encouraged Black people to love themselves, someone who argued worldwide that Islam was a religion of love and human rights, someone who had the capacity to get at the root of our political problems and the bravery to talk truthfully, about those problems and encourage people to transform them.
So love, peace, transformation, and not a word about his politics. So is this the trajectory that we're headed to in terms of what is to be conveyed, in particular to young people? I think the politics should be front and center. Where's the discussion? I'm assuming, so then I hope we're going to get to it then, right? We're going to get to a discussion of the nationalism and the socialism and the pan-africanism and the internationalism and the anti-colonialism and the urban guerrilla warfare and his membership in RAM, and which ever since that great series and the inspiration of Hiram and Ori, I'm not letting that go anymore. I've been insufficient in reminding folks and remembering myself that point. But if you're in the Revolutionary Action Movement, and that's the one organization other than the Nation of Islam that he joined, that should be front and center. So I'm assuming we're going to hear about that and the OAAU.
And Malcolm X has, he has been written about extensively. I remember as a young person when I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, it was a hugely eye-opening experience for me. But there's been a lot of work written about him. There's even a children's book that was written by his daughter, Ilyasa Shabazz, who I understand you work closely with her and the Malcolm X estate on your book.
With all due respect, I think that should be a flag at this point. We have to, unfortunately, hold that up as a point of consideration when the politics of the Dr. Betty Shabazz and Malcolm X Center and Ilyasa Shabazz are more akin to neoliberal nonprofit politics than they are to the politics of Malcolm X. And again, this doesn't even have to be taken as a criticism and just only an understanding of the objective reality of the political differences between the two and the situation and the setting that the center and the family and the estate remain. But if the point is to convey a history and a politics to young people or anyone else about Malcolm X, those differences and distinctions are just going to have to be brought up. And as we talked about even in our roundtable with Kendi about the documentary he did that I'm in, I'm caught up in that similar contradiction, as I think Kendi is caught up in that similar contradiction. So as I'm complaining about it in this instance, I'm also in some ways caught up in a participant in the contradiction myself. So it's something that I think has to be increasingly confronted, including in being self-critical here in this instance, or in if necessary, in others being critical of me in this same vein. But in the end, more importantly is that distinction needs to be made.
A few moments later.
You know, in 2020, I remember seeing your name and your book was everywhere. You were a go-to voice for conversations about racial inequity and justice. And your book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, had made it to #1 in the New York Times bestseller list. You were a MacArthur Fellow. You had just launched the Boston University Center for Anti-Racist Research, which had a big vision, had raised $55 million, had a big staff. But you also faced some criticism for your leadership there, and the center is now closing. Ibram, I'm curious, what a wild ride. What has this all been like for you?
Well, it's interesting to have navigated that ride while I was writing this biography of Malcolm X, because Malcolm X ended up being killed by members of the Nation of Islam, by other ministers who were deeply critical of his leadership.
Malcolm's home in New York was firebombed, and just 1 week later,
Where is he going with this?
39-year-old Malcolm X was gunned down by members of the Nation of Islam. But there are those who still believe the government had a hand in Malcolm's death.
There were many people during his era who had all sorts of issues with the way he thought and the way he acted in the world, even Black people. And that's not including the level of attacks that he faced from people who wanted to conserve racism or convince Black people to continue to hate themselves. And so I tried to, in many ways, as I was facing this personal backlash, to not take it personal, because I've noticed how.
Am I tripping? Is he associating what he went through with what Malcolm X went through? Is he associating his struggle with that of Malcolm X? Is he doing what I was just suggesting we not do by equating a Black Lives Matter related or associated or parallel form of struggle with that of Malcolm X and the form of politics that Malcolm was looking to grapple with in his life? I mean, what is he saying that the backlash that he got from a community of scholars, because we covered the story here and we covered Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor's story about this, is write-up about this as well. So is Kendi suggesting that the quote-unquote backlash that he got from scholars who were complaining about misappropriated funds and lack of research opportunities to Malcolm's struggle against the Nation of Islam and the United States of America's intelligence community and police apparatus?
So many figures across history, have faced sort of similar challenges. And I think in many ways that probably made the book better.
So is he saying that a white conservative establishment calling him out as a race hustler, as we also covered in the story about his struggles at Howard? Or is he saying, am I hearing this? I must be tripping. As is often asked, please put in the comments if you think I'm tripping on this issue. Or any other for that matter.
Because I could have some sense of what Malcolm, particularly the last few years, of his life.
He said he got some sense of Malcolm's last years based on this struggle, son.
Was facing. And I think, ironically, Malcolm ended up deciding to leave the Nation of Islam.
That's not irony.
And ended up deciding to create his own organizations. And ultimately, I decided to go to Howard University. And
holy shit. He's saying his leaving one elite institution for the black bourgeoisie, most elite black bourgeoisie institution, with a deal and an arrangement, as even as we covered here, scholars like Dr. Greg Carr were suggesting don't get offered to anybody else. So he's got some exclusive super deal. And this is him saying that he's Oh my goodness.
And I think there's also parallels there.
The fuck is he talking about?
A subliterate pamphlet on how the United States is a disgusting, immoral country that must be changed immediately and forever. That tract is entitled How to Be an Anti-Racist.
But as we just covered, again, folks, please, if you haven't, why, the 100 Years of Malcolm X series we did was fantastic. Again, salute to Hiram Rivera and Dr. Orasami Burton, who both joined me on the last, and it's not really right to call it the last, but on the birthday edition of that series. And one of the points that we talked about was the stress Malcolm was facing at the end of his life and his discussion not long before his assassination with Jan Carew about many other things, including his recognition that the Nation of Islam was not likely the culprit in his harassment, and that he needed to reassess that, among other things as well, and that he was under severe levels of stress regarding the surveillance by the U.S. intelligence community. And now we're being asked to consider this in comparison to Tucker Carlson talking trash about him as he leaves, again, one elite institution for another elite, if not institution, an elite position and contract with that institution. I mean, Malcolm got assassinated. This is come on, man. Come on, man.
It is written by a former University of Florida professor called Henry Rogers, who, now that he is rich and famous, goes by his revolutionary name, Ibram X. Kendi.
Well,
the book is garbage.
So then to receive criticisms from your own staff, I guess as I've been reading your book, I think it's as much about Malcolm X's life.
So the staff couldn't have been correct, right? Because the staff that was criticizing him is now to be associated and likened with Tucker Carlson and the right wing and the white supremacists ruling elite and everybody else, because we're meant to take away from this. Kendi is mightily struggling against in an environment akin to that of Malcolm X, particularly at the. I mean, this is wow. This is wild. Al Jazeera, never mind Kendi. Al Jazeera as a journalism outlet should be taken to task for this with their 15.8 million subscribers. This is ridiculous.
And legacy, as it is a self-reflection of your own journey. When you think about the criticism that you faced, what are the lessons that you draw from Malcolm X?
So many lessons. I think one lesson is that I think the unfortunate truth is that Malcolm would talk a lot, particularly the last few years of his life, about how much books transformed him. And he was a voracious reader. And he would have been one of those students, if he went to college, that he wasn't going to say anything unless he read a book. And unfortunately, we have many people who have serious issues with my books, and they've never read my books. And
that wasn't the criticism of the people in that research center. She had asked about your colleagues, your peers, and the people in that research center, not Tucker Carlson's audience. So this is another crazy conflation. That's not what happened here. This is wild. And again, I'm becoming more irritated with Al Jazeera than I am with Kendi.
and I have to just accept that reality, right? I also have to accept the reality, and this is something that Malcolm faced within the Nation of Islam, that other ministers had serious issues with him precisely because he was so popular. And
this is crazy. Our people son, this is crazy. This is I don't even know what the right word is other than I don't even, this is bizarre. This is bizarre. The parallels he's drawing here. I mean, I can't believe where is the self-reflection? Where is the humility Where's just the historical accuracy and honesty? Yes, you may have gone through some things. Yes, they may be even serious in some cases, but you can't equate yourself to Malcolm X. This is
Indeed, the head of the Newark Mosque of the Nation of Islam, which oversaw his assassination, that's precisely why that minister despised him and hated him. And so, unfortunately, that's just something you have to accept. And Malcolm accepted it, and other leaders over the course of history have accepted it as well. And I've learned to accept that too.
So now he's just a leader now. He's just a leader. Man, this is shame on this whole operation. Maybe the sound editors and video editor, the camera people could get a pass on this, maybe. But whoever participated in this production, flag on the play, thumbs down, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
This is a mess.
I do wonder, and I know that Malcolm X, one of the things that was so great about him was his ability for self-reflection and self-critique. And I imagine that was an inspiration.
Self-reflect, could any of that be applied here, please?
I want to switch gears a little bit because, Al Jazeera has a global audience, and Malcolm X connected the Black struggle in the U.S. to anti-imperialist movements worldwide.
Okay.
So as we continue to witness Israel's brutal war on the people of Gaza, which is, I understand, a place that Malcolm X visited, how can anti-racist movements today
and spoke about in connection to Black liberation here and decrying, of course, the Zionist occupation,
build solidarity across borders?
Well, I think first and foremost, I'm happy you mentioned that Malcolm visited Gaza in 1964. It was really just a day and a half, but he was truly moved and inspired, by that visit. Ended up coming back to Egypt and writing a piece that challenged Israeli Zionism in particular. I think one thing that anti-racists across borders can use as a place for solidarity is typically imperialism is justified by dehumanizing the particular groups that's being subjected to apartheid or settler colonialism or genocide. And that is whether those people are Arab or Black, or Asian. And I think we can recognize those similar forms of language. For instance, you've had Palestinians who've been literally called human animals. Black people have been described as human animals. There's all sorts of ways in which people have been framed as not human to then justify the carnage and the plunder of those people. And I think we need to connect that across borders and across races to really build a multiracial, anti-racist global movement that challenges imperialism wherever it is.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Ibram, I want to talk about the future a little bit and bring it back to your book. I know that you wrote this book for young people. So for young people who are reading it and diving into who Malcolm X was for the first time and discovering him, if he were alive today, what do you think his message might be to them?
I think his message would be to be fearless, especially in this moment where we have state power who is trying, whether that's in the United States or even in the Middle East or, Western and Eastern Europe, parts of Africa, parts of Latin America, who are literally trying to induce fear through soldiers, through prisons, through propaganda. And that then fear can bind us and control us. And Malcolm somehow, some way, was able to be fearless. He knew that the U.S. government, he knew that the Nation of Islam wanted him silenced, wanted him stopped, but he didn't stop. And he realized that if you are not liberated, then in many ways, you're not alive. These are things that he talked about literally to really inspire himself and to inspire others. And fortunately, we see young people all over the world who are literally fearless. And I think that Malcolm X is not only one of the more pivotal historical figures of the 20th century, but I think human beings have so much to learn from his life. And, from ultimately, he died with a message of human rights, a message of encouraging people across the world to fight for the rights that they should be receiving as human beings. He was very vigilant about saying, no, these are not things we should be requesting. These are not things we should be demanding. These are things that should be guaranteed to us as human beings. And of course, he was saying this primarily to Black people, and to Muslims, but it was a message really for all people, particularly in this moment where our human rights, are being snatched left and right. And so when we think of who we can be and what we need to be in this moment to liberate ourselves, we can look to Malcolm X.
Thank you for coming on The Take and sharing your story and this book with the world.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I don't know. That last part wasn't horrible, but it's just a very soft way to make a point about Malcolm and the times that we're living in now. I don't think it doesn't have the appropriate energy. And then there's no mention of his politics. A brief mention of imperialism, but please check the 100 Years of Malcolm X series and all the sources that we talked about there, and the work of those who were referenced and involved, and put in the comments what you think I should have said better or what needs more to be said about this. We could continue to revisit it and maybe look even more at Kendi's book, but the parallels drawn here that he was making, the absence of the politics, I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.